Hey everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Erin Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, we have a special guest. We actually made a guest appearance on his podcast, and now he is coming on ours as he is very, very diverse in many different fields that all include fitness. I just want to give a brief introduction to who he actually is. And then Steve, if we miss anything, you could just fill in the blanks. But Steve is a NASM certified personal trainer and corrective exercise specialist with over 25,000 hours of personal training experience. So he knows his shit. He is the author of Fitness Business 101 and is the podcast host of TrulyFit. He's also a longtime buddy of mine. We grew up in the same town, so we know each other very, very well. Steve, do you want to add anything to that?
Nothing to add to that. It's good to speak with both of you, and I like being on the other side of the microphone here, getting to answer the questions rather than ask them.
All right. So with how diverse you actually are and what you offer to your listeners on your podcast, it's very, very diverse, right? You tackle all different types of topics. So I'm pretty sure besides your experience in the fitness world, just by having those conversations with all these different types of people that are in that fitness world, and even like branch out. Like I know you had a tax guy on because you're also focused on running businesses as well. So there's three main topics that we really, really want to discuss with you today. They include, what is it? It's health over vanity is going to be like our first one that we're going to dive into. And then because you have so many guests on, we figured it'd be really great to talk to you about any problems that you see with the fitness industry today. And I know you're very outspoken, so you probably have some really good ideas on what we could fix in the fitness industry. And then going into something which Dr. Erin really likes it to kind of bust my balls about, though it's with intuitive eating. So how's that sound?
That sounds perfect. Excited.
All right, sweet. So let's start off with this health over vanity, because we see this a lot, right? I know a lot of people are shooting for like, I need to have the six pack for the summer. And just because you have a six pack doesn't really mean you're actually healthy. I know when I'm in that type of shape, I feel like shit most of the time. But let's just take 1,000-foot view here. How would you define the concept of health over vanity?
Well, I coined the term health is in your labs, not in your abs. And
I
on the
like
TrulyFit podcast, on the TrulyFit podcast, we talk a lot about how health and wealth have so many crossovers. You can compare so many things and analogize things from the wealth perspective and a health perspective. So there's a guy out there right now driving a Lamborghini who's probably $100, $200, $300, $400,000 in debt, doesn't have any assets, doesn't have a 401k, doesn't have any savings, but he has a Lamborghini, so everyone thinks he's rich.
Yeah.
That's, that same thing happens in the fitness world all the time, right? There's people out there that look great, but they're not actually being great to their bodies. Maybe they wake up every morning in pain. Maybe they're on a lot of drugs, both prescription and otherwise. Maybe, maybe they don't really have the long-term game plan to say, when I'm 55, when I'm 65, what do I want for my body, for myself? Yeah. They're just thinking about the now and the vanity portion. So that's what I try to push people towards, because I trained seniors when I first got into the industry. So I know what it's like to be 65 and 75 and not take care of your body. And for the same way, the people who just work all day and sit down all day and eat like crap end up being at 65. A lot of those people also who end up looking like that are the people who push it too hard, or the people who are only focused on vanity and end up having so many injuries that they can't maintain, a functional, well-oiled machine later in life.
Yeah, I mean, you look at someone like Ronnie Coleman. He's a perfect example of what you just said. Like the dude, like you weren't beating that guy in the Olympia at all, right? No. And you didn't see anyone bigger than him ever. And then now look at him; he could barely walk on his own.
Yeah, that's. I think he is somebody that isn't an anomaly in that industry, right? This is the norm. People who bodybuild to that extent and only care about looking that particular way. You get over 300 pounds, some of these guys, and lift in that manner. They can't maintain that, right? From a structural standpoint and also from a muscular standpoint. You guys know what it's like to be on stage that's a small portion of the year you're going to be able to look like that. So
Yeah.
I just think we have to be realistic with our clients and say, hey, you know, I know I say that vanity should get your clients like through the door. They might say, hey, Vinny, like I saw a picture of you and like your back looked great. I want my back to look like yours. You say, fine, you know, like we'll work on it. But then once you get them through the door from the vanity aspect, then it's the teaching component to say, hey, listen, this isn't just about vanity. This is about health. So although, yeah, maybe long term we can make sure that you have a shredded back, we also want to make sure that you're a well-oiled machine and we care about your full body.
Yeah. I love the labs over abs. I might need to steal that.
She's definitely gonna steal it. No, she's gonna post
That's
it on
great.
Friday as for like her quote of the day and shit. No,
I'll give
you won't
you
get
credit.
No, you won't get
You could steal it, but I might get some sort of kickback because I already have it trademarked. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, I agree with you. I see a lot of vanity, obviously, and I echo what you say as far as like seeing some older patients and seeing what they go through. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we as a society prioritize the aesthetic goals over the health goals when now we're living longer, and I think it's becoming more relevant. But it seems that people are still focused on vanity and social media and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask even older people than us, I think what rings true is that you can tell someone something 1,000 times, but until they've somehow faced it themselves, they never truly learn. So it takes a big injury. I've had a few of them. It takes some sort of life-altering thing to realize how important your long-term health is. Maybe it's somebody in your family that has a big injury or passes away or something. It takes something life-altering in order for you to change your ways. It doesn't matter how many times someone says it. I think from a vanity perspective, again, it's normal, especially when we're 17, 18, 19, you're trying to get the
Right.
girl next door or the boy next door. Of course you want to look good. That's fine. But as you age, it shouldn't take you to 50 or 60 because that's going to be too late by that time to notice, hey, I should have
Right.
been exercising for long-term health. You should notice it earlier. And again, sometimes it takes that big injury for you to have that aha moment and realize, oh shit, I really do need to start working out for long-term health. But I also think when you're in pain, if you're someone who's in pain, you just get used to it after a certain amount of time. You just think it's the norm. You don't even realize that there are people who wake up every day and feel great. And I feel bad for people. And that's why you guys, as well as me, spend our lives trying to help those people.
Yeah, I was actually just listening. It's funny you said that. I was literally just listening to a different podcast, and they were talking about how he gave his grandmother creatine for Christmas present, and she's always had leg pain, and she was like in tears talking to him the other day, saying how she doesn't feel that leg pain anymore. And he's like, I don't think it's the creatine. I might be the creatine. Who knows? That's the only thing she changed, but she's attributing it to it, and she was so grateful for it because she was like, I forgot what it was like to live without pain. And you just said that. So yeah.
Sure. And could the creatine have been a catalyst for her to go, well, if my son or whoever grandson bought me this creatine, that means I need to start working out. And then she starts exercising. And that's really the thing that makes her, you know, feel better. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. It's the fact
She's
that
feeling better now. Yeah.
she's feeling better. Somebody cared. They made that first change and now she's out of pain.
Yeah. Now we have this, so a big thing in terms of like this vanity over health is like a lot of society plays on that, right? Like the girls growing up having to look like Barbie and giving those dolls, right? And then the dieting and the modeling and you get Dr. Oz telling all these people, you know, raspberry ketones. And so society plays a huge role on impacting perceptions of health. How do you see, because you work with people every day, how do you see this affecting your everyday clients? And you have a daughter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
2.5. Yeah.
so how are you worried? Like, is that if it's going to affect your daughter in particular? Because we do see it a lot more happening with females than we do males. So
Yeah.
two-part question.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I'm very sensitive to that. You know, we have those talks, my wife and I, that when my daughter gets to a certain age, we're not going to talk about weight in the house. We're not going to say, what do you know, my wife is not going to say, hey, I'm weighing X amount today. I didn't weigh that last week. If we want to have those conversations in private, that's fine. But we're not going to talk about our weight for our children. Yeah. Can we talk about the fact that we like to exercise, we want to go to the gym. Sure, I don't think that's a bad thing,
Mhm.
but we really want to keep those kind of vanity conversations put to the side for the adults because we don't want that to feed into the children. But yeah, girls, Jonathan Haidt wrote a few books about this. The Coddling of the American Mind was the first one. The second one evades me, but yeah, girls are suffering way more nowadays than boys are, as far as, mental health, suicide rates, all of that is up. And, they tie it to social media, like the exact years that we all got on Facebook and then Instagram and then Twitter. That's when these mental health disorders shot through the roof, right? That's not just a crazy coincidence. This is the reason why. So I think keeping your kids off of social media to a certain age is going to be key. And even keeping them off of smartphones, giving them, like we had when we were growing up, Vinny, we had flip phones. It did the job. You got to still text people and get in contact. So your parents always knew where you were. You got to call people, but you didn't have the constant scrolling in front of your face of, an algorithm that is essentially targeting you to keep on. And again, like you said, a lot of the algorithms, unfortunately, are targeting things that young women struggle with. And that is the vanity portion, from people faking their images and making everything about how they look and not telling the other side of the story, how hard it is to look like that, or what they're hiding, behind closed doors.
Yeah. Yeah. And just touching back on that question, when you are dealing with these everyday clients that come to you, do you see that affect you? Because I know, like, sometimes potential clients will say to me, like, hey, I want to look like this person. Is it possible? And I'm like, your genetics are totally different and you have no idea how much gear this chick's on. So I wouldn't shoot for that, right? So, like, do you see that? Does that happen often with your clients?
I'm always upfront and completely honest with my clients. There's no reason not to be. It's always going to backfire if you give them any kind of hope that really isn't just there. Now, of course, you have to use some niceties and put it the right way sometimes. You don't want to be mean, but I always try to be as honest as I can and say, we need to have short-term goals and long-term goals, but your long-term goals are going to supersede your short-term goals. The long-term goals are health goals. We could have some short-term vanity goals in between, but ultimately, if you want to work with me, I feel like I'm obligated to make sure that you're healthy into old age. So if any of these goals contradict the long-term goal, I'm not going to do it. If a 48-year-old guy comes to me, Vinny, and he currently squats 210 max, and he goes, I want to squat 500 pounds. That's my goal. I'm going to tell him no, because you're already 48 and there's too much of a gap for us to double your squat. And as you know, the further you go up in weight, the harder it is, right? It's easy to get from 210 to 310, but from 310 to 410 is hard. And then from 410 to 510 is much harder, right? And all the injuries that could come along with this, it's too much. We're not going to get that goal. We're going to be focused, even if you wanted to do it. Now, all of our energy and effort is focused on this one single goal. That's not good. What are we going to spend? If I only have 3 or 4 hours with you a week, we have to do everything surrounding your 500-pound squat instead of mobility and strength and teaching you things. So, you have to be realistic. And again, I won't let short-term goals and vanity goals supersede the long-term health and wellness goal.
How do you focus on, or what are some practical tips, I guess, to focus on more on function, right? Like over vanity. What do you tell people? How do you shift that mindset to say, really, it's more about longevity and how functionally well you do versus what you look like?
Yeah. Well, first, sort of maybe 3 different things I want to touch on here. Later on in this conversation, we're going to talk about intuitive eating. I think the North Star for people, both in the food, in the dietary habits and in fitness habits, should be to sort of do these things intuitively. But you can't do that until you're properly educated on the science and your body. So I can go into the gym, do a full body dynamic warm up, maybe do some push-ups and squats, and I can have an understanding of that day what I may be best suited to do, right? My shoulder may be cranky and go, although I planned on doing chest presses today, not good. Anterior delt's a little cranky from another injury that I had in my clavicle. I'm going to stick today with doing pulling exercises instead or something, right? But the average person can't do that right away. They don't have the knowledge, they don't have the understanding of their body. So they do need a plan in place, right? They do need to work with a professional. And, if they do trust me, which they have to do, what I tell them is, we're going to do some things that you want to do, but we also have to do some things that I need you to do too, right? This has to be you have to trust me as the professional to prepare this for you. But as far as tips are concerned, I would say if you look at anybody who is in their 60s or 70s and 80s, you're going to see a big variance. There are 70-year-olds who look 58, right? And they're fantastic, and they play golf every day, and they go on, trips to Rome, and they're walking around. And then you see 70-year-olds who look like they're 82.
Yeah.
Like you got to make the decision now, because you can't start, you can't start at 72, right? The reason why that person feels and looks like that now is because they started now. So we have to focus on functional movements and mobility, and you have to take days off when you're in pain. You have to make the right decisions for your body. This is a long-term game. So don't worry about the short term. This is a long-term game.
Yeah. I mean, you said earlier that sometimes it takes like a life-altering event to kind of motivate people to change in that regard. Without that, though, I see the same thing in my practice, right? Usually it's people that already have a secondary disease state, so the chronic issue, where now they're motivated to change their lifestyle. But a lot of my, I guess my wish list in medicine would be to focus on primary prevention, where prevent it before the disease state happens. So I guess in what ways do you create that urgency? How do you make
I scare them.
see? Yeah,
I scare them. I mean, I do. I'll be honest with you. I scare
Yeah.
them. I scare them through a lot of times, like what I would call fitness and kinesiology and anatomical jargon, right? Just say,
Yeah.
oh, hey, what you're doing now is going to cause you cervical column issues. If we have problems in C6 and C7 because of this, that innervates into your tricep. You're not going to be able to use your arm, right? Just,
Right.
and they go, oh shit, like that doesn't
Yeah.
sound good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe I won't do this exercise. So like, there has to be a little bit of giving them the reality through the parlance and the jargon that we use in the health and fitness and medical world. So they go, oh, this is serious, right? This isn't just like I wake up and my arm hurts.
Yeah.
Like, no, there could be some serious damage going on here. And then you have to even point to other people in the fitness facility and their life and my life, and just give examples and say, this is what happened with him, and do as much as you can. But you're right. It's unfortunate. Sometimes it takes that injury, that thing to happen. I had a client who unfortunately never listened, and he lifted on his own. He came to me, but when he was doing the things on his own, he was being what I would call unsafe. And he's, slipped the disc and had problems. And then, we backtracked for a little bit, but then he had that aha moment, right? It changed how he lifted, and he started going to yoga, and he started getting massages, and he started taking care of his body more, and he started taking more rest days. And all I can do is scare them and teach them. Sometimes we just have to wait for them to have an aha moment, and you hope it's not a really bad one.
Yeah, we use very similar tactics, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, with what you said, it's kind of like you use this very, what's the word? Very educated lingo, to where it's like, this dude knows what he's. It's almost like a Gary Brecka, Gary Brecka scheme, just to get them to be like, this guy knows what he's talking about, right? You use these big terms, and they're like, oh shit, really? Because all I heard was I can't lift my arm. And he must know what he's talking about. So I'm not going to do that anymore. So it's a cool little way that you spin it, but you're doing it for good, to where some people like Gary Brecka do it for,
the good thing is, though, too, what you guys do and what I do, inevitably, like there's always people coming to you to help them out with something. And then they get to see if you really give a shit or not pretty quickly. Right. And then once you build that rapport, then they're going to trust you. So like, if I have a client, maybe they want to work out one day, and I have what I call like the update phase in the beginning of the exercise. So maybe they're doing a dynamic workout, and I say, hey, Tom, tell me about your week. Tell me about your day. And he said, I didn't really sleep well last night. And I stepped off the curb, my foot hurts and this and that. And I go, well, guess what? We're not working out today, or we're going to just do abs today. And then maybe we're going to go swimming in the pool and do some things because your foot hurts. Right.
I love that. That's a great way, to handle that, right? Because from an injury perspective, I'm always telling patients, don't push it. Use common sense. Like, don't go and overdo it, especially younger patients, right? With musculoskeletal injuries, shoulders, they're like, oh no, I'll push through the pain. And that's just, it's not a good mentality either. It's the outliers that you worry about.
Yeah, totally. It's a really bad mentality. I tell people when they start working out, you should have like light, medium, and difficult, for lack of a better term, kind of workouts that you can do no matter what.
Yeah.
So if there is something going on, there's still an out where if you're one of these people, because there are these people who go, fuck this, I'm going to the gym. Like
Right.
I'm going to the gym no matter what. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Do your small muscle day, right? Do things that are not going to be that difficult. There's always something to do. And on the days you feel great, do the hard workout. You don't have to just not go to the gym, but you can't say, hey, I plan to do heavy squats today. So although I slept 4 hours last night because my toddler was up crying all night, and although I didn't get to eat except for breakfast, and now it's 5 p.m., I'm going to do heavy squat day. That's not smart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's pretty cool that you say that, man. And you have that perspective, and you modify based off of, how they feel, right? A lot of trainers that people go into, it's like, we have this scheduled, this is what we're doing. It's on the schedule. Like, no matter what, you're like, yeah, dude, if your shoulder's bothering you, why the hell would we train shoulders today? We're not doing that. Let's do something else, like a pull instead. So we
Yeah.
don't have to push through that motion. But getting back a little bit on before we end this topic, I really want to hear your perspective with this one. Getting back to the health and vanity, what are your thoughts on health at every size? For lack of a better term, like for example, Lizzo saying that she's healthy and beautiful.
If you weigh 600 pounds, you can't be healthy, right? So I think this term started with, a really positive vibe behind it, saying health at any size. If you're slightly overweight, that doesn't mean you're not as healthy as somebody who looks great. Just like we talked about the health over vanity thing, right? Maybe you're just not somebody who has that beautiful model aesthetic. That doesn't mean you're unhealthy. But health at any size, if you actually take it for its literal meaning and term, is impossible, right? You can't be healthy at 700 pounds, at 800 pounds. Where does it stop, right? Most people over 400 pounds are not healthy, right? We know, we have the metrics of how long you were going to live, right? And we know the mortality rate of people over 400 pounds. So I think it started with again, like I said, a really good positive messaging. I think it was stolen essentially by people who are extremely overweight, who are taking this too literally now. And, as the internet does, and as these small vocal minorities do, they start just pushing like just crazy, almost like psychotic agendas where they're willing to push all the science aside and make up their own science even, and say, things like, obesity is like cancer. You just get it. It's not your fault. You didn't make any lifestyle decisions in order to obtain obesity. And it becomes this cult of personality where it's that, the heavy people versus the light people. I just think it's a bad way to think about this. We have to agree there are metrics like lab work that show us who's healthy and who's not.
Yeah.
Well, and to be on the other flip side is, because what I see is a lot of competitors, right? And health at any size, any outlier. So even if you're very small and you have a low body weight or body fat mass, that's not sustainable either. So, somewhere there has to be balance and lab work, and it's more than just outwardly appearance. Some people have that really lean look, but they're very unhealthy, right? If you got their lab work, they'd be suffering. And so I think you have to be very careful about, those kind of assumptions on either perspective, on either outlier.
Yeah, like the two extreme ends of the spectrum, obviously, but I would say the majority is sort of what Steve was alluding to where, if you just look at like a lot of chronic diseases can be alleviated by reducing obesity, right? And so it just pushes the envelope that says, hey, reduce your overall body fat mass and you can get healthier. So I think the health at every size, I think that's just kind of what's going on with society today, where accept everybody for what they are and who they are, which is perfectly fine, whatever your beliefs are on that. This is not a political podcast. But I feel more towards where Steve was going, to where there's a point in time where you could be big and beautiful without a doubt, but that doesn't mean you're healthy. So I think, Steve, you hit the nail on the head with that.
It's a counterculture thing. It happens all the time. And again, we're going to hit on intuitive eating later, but sometimes when there's one end of the spectrum pushed too much, there's other people who go the completely opposite way. You'd like everyone to meet in the middle,
Right.
but that's not how it works, right? You get people going far in one direction, then you get people going the opposite direction. People say you have to look this way to be healthy, and then they go, no, actually, you can look any way to be healthy, including be healthy at any size. So it's unfortunate, but it's just a counterculture argument.
Well, I think that question leads right into this next topic, which is problems that we actually see in the fitness industry.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them, so we could we could be here forever. I mean, there's problems on both ends of the spectrum. As somebody who's a certified personal trainer, I see problems from my perspective, like the actual people who do what I do for a living, and then I see problems on the other side of the spectrum from what maybe the client expects of a certified personal trainer, if that makes sense. So from a certified personal trainer perspective, a big issue is that 80% of us never make a full-time career out of this for more than 2 years. Yeah. Right? That's a lot. That's a lot of people. And why is that? Well, it's a low barrier to entry. You can get a fly-by-night certification. There are certainly better, higher level certifications, but ultimately it's just a piece of paper. It's a little bit of studying. It doesn't mean you're going to be good at it. And then it's not a salaried type job. That no one explains that to you. You take these tests, these certifications, and everyone goes, oh, great, this is going to be great. I get to do this for a living. And then they go to a gym and they're like, get on the phones, call people. You're making minimum wage to do that. And then if you find a client, we'll give you 50% of the $50 an hour that we're charging. So it's like, okay, so the average trainer is getting $25 an hour when they're working one-on-one. And then otherwise they're getting minimum wage to work on the floor and cleaning up towels. It's not sustainable. There's too many people and the cream rises to the top and most people fail out of it. So from a personal training perspective, you would hope that there's a better path for personal trainers, or that they're upfront with you right away. It's like, Vinny, you played football. You went on to play some football in college, right? At some point you realize there's only 0.5% of people who are ever going to make a living playing football. Yeah. So you either do this because you love it, or you got to get out because it's really difficult to do. And most personal trainers don't know that. So that's a problem.
How do you think, just to kind of veer off a little bit, how do you think AI is going to affect personal trainers and some of the models out there as technology advances? Like, do you think it'll be less saturated, or do you think they even see this as an issue coming their way?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've thought about it a lot. Maybe I use AI for a lot of things that I do in my business models, right? I'm very into AI, but I do think that personal training is not going to be affected by it. I think it's actually going to be better because of it. It has to then become even more personal, right? The personal side takes over because the AI can never do that. What the AI can do is it could input all Vinny's data, right? All the exercises that maybe he wrote down for the past 2 years that he's done. They can put in all the metrics, all the things he's done in his past. They can look at everything, and maybe they can pump out the best arm workout that I could never even create for Vinny. But what the AI can't do is when me and Vinny are working out in the gym together, or if I'm his trainer, and like we just talked about, he's got some pain, and Vinny senses that I really give a shit and that I really care, and then I work on, okay, let's take a rest here. Let's do some legs instead. We're not going to do arms today. We're going to do this and that. That personal aspect is never going to be taken over by AI. So I think trainers who were originally going, I need to scale, I need to go online, just build some shitty program and send it to 100 people. No, you got to do the opposite. You got to charge more and give more and have less clientele, kind of like what you guys do, right? Hey, we're going to give you everything. We're going to give you the medical side. We're going to give you all the stuff in one big package, and we'll charge you more and give you more attention rather than just trying to scale.
Yeah. What do you just throwing it out there? What do you think the biggest problem right now in the fitness industry is? If you can name one, because I know you said there's a lot. So if you can name one.
Yeah, it's on the other side of the spectrum. So, we first just talking about what personal trainers and people in my industry struggle with. What the problem is on the other side, the customer, the consumer side, is that they don't know who's good and who's not. Right? If I told you today I am certified by the International American Society of Fitness, you go, oh, cool. Well, I just made it up. I don't know. That doesn't even exist. So no one knows what these certifications mean. They don't know how long they take to get. They don't know the difference between one trainer and another. And because of that, some people are paying really good money and getting injured or getting screwed over or not getting proper advice, or then assuming, hey, I don't need to go to a personal trainer. I went to one once. They sucked. I'm never going back. So I think that's the biggest problem, is not having maybe some sort of consolidated fitness organization where everybody has to raise up their levels of qualifications and have some internship type experiences, almost like a residency program would.
Yeah.
Are they working towards that at all? Do you see any programs that, so no.
Years ago, it was kind of, maybe being proposed under the table in Washington. Actually, they were thinking about like passing a bill, and it just fell through. I don't know if it was from lobbyists or what, but
Right.
since that point, that was maybe 20 years ago. No, there's been nothing. It's just the wild, wild west, and you can, yeah, you could actually train without having any certifications. So if a gym wants to hire you,
Right.
they don't need you to even have a certification. They have their own rules and regulations, and of course, most gyms say you have to have one. But again, a low barrier to entry. It really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. I was going to say one of the biggest problems that I see in this industry is on the same side of the spectrum that you were talking about. It's with the clients. It's their expectations. It's kind of like they think like, I woke up and I look like the way I do because I trained a little bit. I've been training with weights since I was in 7th grade until today, like until now. Like it takes so long to do the stuff, and then what you've done to your body and how you got out of shape or gained the weight and how long that took, you expect to do it in, a 30-day period. You go hire personal trainers, you don't even know how to train, but you feel like, oh, because you hired a personal trainer, you should be gaining muscle. It's so hard to gain muscle, and you got to learn how to train first. Like there's so many steps that are needed in whether it's losing fat or building muscle or just getting better with specific lifts, being a power lifter, whatever it is. So many steps that are that need to be taken, and experience that needs to be had before you could get results that you expect to look like. And a lot of that could be with social media and seeing these kids that are, photoshopping their bodies. Goob, that guy Goob points them all out now. People photoshopping their bodies and saying like, I've been training for a year and this is what I got. It's like, come on, like really? Like that I just think the expectations are perpetuated by social media. I do. I think, and I think that's a huge problem in the fitness industry.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, obviously educating our clients is the only thing we can do, but it's difficult. Like you said, if, people like us, if you've been working out your whole life, and especially if at one point you had a particular kind of physique through muscle memory and things of that nature, it's easier for us to get back to that point, or at least look a little bit closer to that point.
Yeah.
For other people, it's almost never going to happen, right? The amount of dedication that a 48-year-old would have to put in who's never lifted to then be absolutely svelte, it's going to be much harder if he's not on something.
Yeah.
But you just have to be realistic and honest with him. And then again, talk about what I did, say, hey, we're gonna get there, but we have to focus more on the long-term goals. I want you to feel great every morning. Most people at 48 don't feel great every morning. That's your goal. Wake up, don't be sore, don't be in pain. And little by little, you're gonna see the results, and you'll have that picture that you want on the beach, in June and July. We'll get to that. We'll make that a goal, but ultimately it's not about that.
Another thing that I just thought of when you were talking about that in particular is a lot of people have the mentality of the fitness trainer needs to look the part. Even in my industry, the doctor needs to look the part, right? We need to be the picture of health. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, I find that interesting too. It's like, do you want like I don't know, like a pediatrician who doesn't have kids?
Yes,
at some point, my wife was a pediatrician who didn't have kids, right? Now, I mean, now she's not, but
yeah.
What I typically say to that question is that person at some point should have been there and done that. It doesn't mean that at this juncture in their lives, they're able to do that. Again,
Right.
I'll make a crude sports analogy for Vinny and I. We had a coach who played in, major D1 football. And it's good that he played Major D1 football because he saw, high level football. We knew he'd been there and done that and got to there. Now, when he was coaching us, he had bad knees. He could barely move. He wasn't like, he couldn't beat me or Vinny in a race.
No.
But that doesn't mean he didn't know more about football than we did because he'd been there and done that at that point. So I think too many people put an emphasis on you have to look the part now. And that doesn't work because as you get older, you gain more knowledge, right? But as you get older, it is harder to look a certain way. So a 61-year-old trainer who started at 25 is going to have more knowledge most likely than a 18-year-old who's ripped.
Right.
Right. But it's like, do you want the 18-year-old who's ripped, or do you want the 61-year-old who was ripped 40 years ago? Like, so
I'll take
I
Mick
do
all
think,
day. Let's go, Mick.
yeah. So, I do think that's a big part of it is that, yes, you should have gotten there at some point. You should have been involved in it, but it doesn't mean like, look at like Olympic lifting coaches and stuff. Like usually they were at some point, they were like trying to get to the Olympics at least, right? They were really strong. They were powerlifting coaches, but if they're in their 50s from 60s, they probably can't, clean and press what a 20-year-old can do. So it's not just about how you look. It's about what you've done and experienced over a lifetime.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. And that was a good perspective too, because I just did a solo episode where I talked about red flags of coaching and looking the part. And I leaned more towards like, yeah, if I'm going to listen to someone, I want them to at least practice what they preach. Now, that encompasses looking the part, right? Like if you're in there training and you're a trainer and you're 65 years old and you could push some weight around and you know what you're talking about, that goes with looking the part. But I think if it comes down to like a young kid who's really out of shape and is a personal trainer, it might have just been like he went through some BS certification just to get a job, So I think looking into
and it depends on, sorry to interrupt, but it depends on clientele type and their goals. So,
Right.
If somebody does come to you and say, my goal is to be, a bodybuilder, and it's like, well, then, yeah, you should have a specific maybe type of aesthetic or physique. But if someone comes to you and says, like what I just talked about, hey, I just want long-term health and wellness. Well, this trainer, again, it could be very healthy. They're just not in fantastic shape because when you work in my industry and you're working one-on-one with people, I've had points in my career where I was working 45, 50, 55 hours a week. So was I staying in shape? Yeah, I still worked out, but I wasn't in the best shape of my life. I was sort of like skinny and strong, but I wasn't ripped because I was working 55 hours a week. So I couldn't have time to dedicate because I was so busy. And why I was so busy? Because I was providing good information for my clients.
Yeah.
So I do think there's just an overemphasis or over like appreciation for people who look good and people just assume they know what they're talking about. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
So just to kind of close this topic out, what do you think coaches should focus on as far as bringing health into that equation when they're coaching people? Like how is that done? Is there any good ways to do that? Can you give any advice in that area?
Yeah, first I would say don't rush into getting too many clients. Focus on just a few clients at first and do a really good job. It's going to allow you to learn more. You can take your time, give your clients even extra time. In early on in your career, you have time. You're not going to have time when you're booked out, obviously, right? Time is money at some point, but when you don't have a lot of clients, you can use that time to learn more about them, to learn more about the body, to learn more about health, and kind of trial and error. Don't lie to your clients. If they ask you a question you don't know, they say, hey, Steve, I was thinking about doing this and doing this. I'm not really sure about that, but I have some people I can talk to. I'm going to do a little bit of research and I'll get back to you. Take your time, kind of through trial and error, kind of mold your first two clients. It's like if you were building a car in your garage, it's like the first car you're building, like it's going to take time. And as long as you're doing it somewhat safely and you're not hurting your client, and you're being honest with them, it's okay. And I think too many people rush into trying to get as many clients as they can, as fast as they can. And that means they provide bad information or not enough information for their clients. And they never get the experience to like learn slowly on the job. And that's how we all get better.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that.
No, that's another good perspective you threw out there. Because a lot of people, like you say, they see the money signs, right? and they want to just get as much as they can as quick as possible. And they're actually doing their clients a disservice when they go that route. It's sort of like why we put a limit on how many clients we can take at one time. It's like if we go over a certain limit, man, it's just we're not giving the value that we can give to everybody because it's too much to handle. So what Steve's really saying here is like, do your due diligence, give value, and really, really take your time to understand like, hey, this is what I need to do and what I need to learn and actually do more continuing education on if I really, really want to make a career. So
Yeah.
let's go into our last and final topic, which is Dr. Aaron's favorite topic, intuitive eating. So can you just kind of explain the concept of, or like your definition of what intuitive eating actually is?
Yeah, I mean, well, so the sort of the history of it, there was two dietitians in the mid 90s, 95, I believe, who like wrote a book and started using that terminology on it. They're female dietitians. And I think, again, like we talked about earlier on, sort of a counterculture thing. That was when a lot of diets said, like, eat all low fat, eat all this. And it sort of pushed back and say, you know what, we're seeing that a lot of our clients have problems with like control type issues. So we need to lessen that control. Let's open it up, make peace with food, challenge the food police, reject the diet mentality. These are sort of the principles of intuitive eating. And that works a lot. Like I said, that should be our North Star for most of us. I intuitive eat, but I don't think somebody who is 400 pounds who doesn't understand food should intuitive eat. Okay. And let me explain the reason why. First of all, it is a control issue. And there are a lot of, this is beyond my pay grade, but from people I've spoken with, and what I've read, there's a big control issue to, let's say, anorexia and bulimia and things of this nature, right? And that makes a lot of sense. But that's not the vast majority of the problems in America, right? You're talking that is, it's probably underreported, but that's still not the 70 million obese people we have, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't hold the candle to that. That's our major problem. Those people are not dealing necessarily with the same sort of psychological control issue. They're dealing with a physiological control issue. And that physiological control issue is that, Lay's and Nabisco pays $100 million in R&D to make their food so perfectly flavorful that you get addicted to it and you can't put it down. So, to intuitive eat, when your mind is already scrambled, because every time you eat a Dorito, you go, holy shit, this is amazing. And then you eat another Dorito and you just can't stop eating Doritos. When your signals are scrambled, that doesn't happen with broccoli and brown rice.
No.
You don't eat broccoli and go, I need to have as much broccoli as I possibly can until I'm about to puke. You do with Doritos. So that's the problem with intuitive eating, is that you can't trust your intuition because your brain is scrambled.
Yeah, and I see it too as like people who do come to us, I would say our company more so than yours, is because they have an issue where they're not comfortable with their body fat levels and they want to bring that down. And so if they come to me and they're like, hey, can we do intuitive eating? Can we do protocols of intuitive eating? I'm like, intuitive eating got you to this point in position, like to where you are today. So let's get out of that. Let's understand. Let's become aware of food. Let's understand the food that we're taking into our body and what nutrients it provides to us, so we can make better decisions, get more mindfulness, practice that for a while until you get very good at it. And then we could start adding in that intuition part of it.
Yeah. So to me, I see this as the holy grail, right? Like in a perfect world, I feel like we could all listen to our bodies essentially and know what is good for us and when to stop and how big our portion sizes should be. So I guess, how do we go from a diet culture to, or maybe even a non-diet culture to intuitive eating? How do we get there?
The same way we do in fitness, where I say, right now I can go into a gym every day. I don't have a plan. I just don't have plans. Here and there, for like every Tuesday for a 6-month period, or excuse me, a 6-week period, I'll do the Murph, which is like a kind of a CrossFit program. When I just I just need a test for myself, and I just try to beat my times. But other than that, I go to the gym every day and I just do something, and I feel my body out and I warm up and I see what's available and I just build a game plan there and then and I do it. But that takes time. Could the average person who's never worked out just go to a gym and do whatever? They don't even know what the hell they're doing. So the goal, again, the North Star is to intuitive eat. How do we get there? Well, first we have to make conscious changes. We have to introduce healthy foods and healthy habits, and habits only happen with conscious decision making. So whatever that small habit is, we say, all right, Vinny says, you got to start waking up at 6:30 a.m. At least 3 days a week. And you have to make a 3-egg white omelet with veggies and turkey sausage. If you can do that for 3 weeks, 3 days a week, then we'll add in the next thing. And then your client comes back to you and go, you know what? I actually really love this this egg white omelet, Vinny. Can I, you said throw peppers in there. Can I throw tomatoes in there? He goes, of course. Yeah, throw tomatoes in there. And they start to learn a little bit more about food and what's good and what's bad and on all these decisions. And then before you know it, now his lunch is a little bit more structured and scheduled, and then the dinner. And then when you've learned about this, that's when you can start stripping away the rules, because your body is comfortable with the foods. You start to understand your fullness cues and all the rest. But you have to have the structure first before you let it loose. It's almost like the analogy I just thought of now is like, if you're going to let your dog off a leash, your dog better be trained, right? The dogs that are good off leashes are the dogs who've had really, really strict training, and then you can let your dog off the leash.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
I remember, I competed for years, and I thought, one of the last competitions I did, I thought if I can intuitively eat and not measure, because I thought measuring was such pain in the butt. And it took a while and some adjustment, but I felt like I did pretty good. I mean, until the last few weeks, then I had to kind of,
A little
a
behind, but
little bit behind. But that was kind of one of my goals. Was I thought if I can compete with intuitively eating, that would be like a huge accomplishment. But I feel like it's a skill set, right? It takes a lot of knowledge, a lot of doing it for so many years and knowing what your portion sizes are, recognizing your hunger cues. Some people don't even necessarily have the normal hunger cues. It's more like they hit a wall or they get weaker, and that might be their body saying, all right, I need more fuel.
yeah,
So
a lot of people aren't even aware.
yeah.
They don't have the body awareness to understand if they're still hungry or if they're not, if they're thirsty or hungry. And that is an acquired skill that I feel like you learn over time. It's funny because, like, Steve, you gave an example of like, oh, well, Vinny said maybe you could eat, 3 times a week, try the three egg white omelet. I go very structured, right? And I have them always ask me why. Like, why are you doing this? Why is this happening? And we get very structured. And then as time goes on, it's kind of like now we're adding in what they want to do, because now they're able to make the right suggestions. Even in their check-in, there's a question specifically for autonomy. And it's like, what do you think we should do with your plan this week based off of all the data that you have for this week, And over time, that answer gets better and better and better. It gets to the point where it's like, you know what to do now. You know when to manipulate. You're listening to your body. You know what food you like and what you enjoy. So you're good to go, man. Like, you could do this. Right now, is that going to lead to intuitive eating without measuring? Some people get very obsessive. I'm one of them, where I like to measure my shit. Like, I measure my breakfast and lunch every day. My dinner, not so much, but I love measuring. It makes me feel more at peace. It makes me feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm okay with that. I know it's a little obsessive, but it makes me feel better. So I'm perfectly fine with doing it. She makes fun of me all the time, which is why I said this is her favorite topic.
Well,
That's fun.
to me, it's like I did measuring for so many years. It's like, how do I get away from that? Because to me, being, competing for so many years, you're an outlier, right? Because you're going to events with your chicken and your rice and you're eating your vegetables and your life seems to revolve around that. And so, part of it, for me at least, was how do I foster a healthier relationship with food where I'm not measuring, where I'm not obsessing over it. And I guess from your perspective, do you see that as a healthier mentality? If you can get to this North Star, if you will, once you have the knowledge base.
Yeah, I do. I mean, ultimately, people need to work with professionals and get individualized advice, like, professionals like you guys. So it's hard to talk in just generalities. But I do think that having the goal of eating most of your meals in an intuitive way should be everyone's goal at some point. Now, I don't think it's bad to measure. You're measuring healthy food, and that makes you feel great. So to each their own. It keeps you structured. It keeps you on a diet. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it also is goal dependent, right? So here and there, people need goals and they need to set their sights on something. We're humans. That's what we do, right? Whatever it is, whether it's business goals or physical goals or, whatever, long-term goals. And I think if your goal is, hey, I want to look the particular way, or I want this sort of level of strength, I want to be able to squat, whatever, then yeah, you might have to measure out some things because there's no other way, or at least record. How else am I going to know if I'm doing this properly unless I can truly analyze it? And as you guys know, everyone lies to themselves, right? Nobody actually eats exactly what they think they ate. They always leave things off. They maybe leave the alcohol off, or whatever else is going on. So I think if you're not in a place where you have this short-term goal, whether it be vanity or strength or a competition or whatever it is, I think the goal there is to eat as intuitively as possible, as much as possible. But again, we can only get there once we've been educated.
Yeah. And I think you hit on a good point. Like, you can't manage something you don't measure. So if you're trying to hit a PR on a squat or a deadlift, if you're not recording the weights, how do you know where to go from there? And it's kind of like, if I want to bring my body to a certain body fat percentage, I know diet's going to play the biggest role there. So I got to manage, and I got to measure out my food and manage it that way to get my body to a certain position. So yeah, I thought that was a great point.
Yeah. And this is a whole nother maybe conversation, but until you have healthy foods surrounding you, you don't even have the option to really eat intuitively because, let's go ahead and say you're craving something sweet, but you don't have blueberries in your freezer where you can make a quick blueberry smoothie or something, right? So it's like, well, then you're going to we're both craving the same thing. I'm craving sweet and so are you. But if all you have is ice cream, then that's all you're going to eat. So it's, it's until you've developed the proper habits and the proper understanding to have the good food around you, you can't blame everything on people's, inability to control themselves.
Yeah, you're going into the whole environment aspect of it, which you should have your environment support your goals. And if your goal is to get healthy, you should prioritize healthy food to be around you, without a doubt.
Yeah,
I agree. So just to end on something, do you think it's possible to practice intuitive eating and to also be lean?
Oh, definitely. I mean, well, what's your definition of lean? Your definition of lean is probably different than mine, right? Because you guys are on stage.
Let's just say a healthy lean.
Yeah.
Healthy lean.
You guys have been on stage, right?
Yeah.
So that's different. So 13% body fat for a guy, 12% body fat, is that lean? I don't know, 11%, 9%, 10% we're talking about. Yeah.
Right.
Could you be single digit body fat percentage and intuitively eat? Definitely. I think you could. That comes with hard work on the fitness end, right? Working out hard 6 days a week, understanding what you're doing, making proper food choices on a regular basis. And although you're intuitively eating, that doesn't mean I'm not mentally recording how many grams of protein I'm having, right? That's part of understanding food. So I understand that each egg that I have in the morning is 70 calories. How is that broken up? Well, I know the 3 macronutrients. I know how many calories in a gram of fat, how many calories in a gram of protein. It's really easy for me to know just by looking at my day. Yeah, I had about 170 grams of protein today, right? Like, just by thinking about the food choices. So I still consider that intuitive eating. I'm not necessarily writing it down. I'm still eating what I want, but maybe it's a little bit of like, I still need to get a little bit more protein in, and I decide to make whatever meal I want bigger. So yeah, if you flex on those things, I would say yes to that answer.
Yeah, and what you did there is you took, like, you needed your experience to be able to know I might need more protein, or I feel like I need these certain foods, right? Because to be single digit body fat, like, you guys are very optimistic with that. I'm going to be pessimistic here because I'm saying, like, if I'm going to intuitively eat and I get hungry, that's my body telling me to eat something, and I go to eat, like, it's going to be very hard. Like, I understand, like, I might not be starving, but if I get hungry and I want to eat something, that would be intuitive, right? But if I'm trying to get to single digit body fat, I'm not getting there intuitive. That's me personally. I don't
Well,
think I
could
can.
you, but couldn't you replace that? Like, what would be a craving that you just couldn't stop? Like, couldn't
Well, it's,
you,
I don't
like,
have food cravings. I just get hungry, and I'm just like, I'll.
He has like a oral fixation, I think.
volume? You're saying volume is the
Yeah.
problem, not food choice.
Yeah.
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 And
Well,
I could go with low calorie, nutrient dense foods and shit and be pretty bland. I get that. But then again, is that intuitive if I want something else? So it's based off of your definition of what intuitive is. My definition is like you eat what you want when you want, and you should know based off of how you feel whether you're satisfied or not satisfied, and you should be able to maintain that way. That's what I think intuitive eating should be. It should be for a maintenance and to maintain where you're at, and hold that position with intuitive eating would be the end goal. I think if I was me personally, if I was to diet down, I can't intuitive eat. There's no way I'd fail every time.
It's a skill
Well,
And
you
I've been
need to
doing it. I've been
practice.
doing this since 2000, since 2012, man. I've been coaching nutrition. I've been into it since 2010. So, and I still can't. It's that's why it's the end goal, man. That's why once you hit intuitive
well,
eating, man,
well,
that's the
some
end
people
goal.
would say that you intuited that you can't do it. So, so in some respects, there is an intuition thing going on here, but at least, you know your body, you know what's best, or in your mind, and you know what's
Yeah.
best for you because like you said, we've been down that road before. So
Mm.
I think that's the purpose. And like and you also, hit on that's you, but you might have clients who, again, have a weird control issue where you think it's better if they just intuitive eat. So
Yeah.
it's funny because these people are trying to do the same thing we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
People who push intuitive eating like wholesale, they're not trying to get people out of shape. They're not trying to get people fat. They just have a different approach.
Yeah.
But it does, there is a little bit of slap in the face when you hear that there are no rules and regulations to something, because we know what it takes to get people to their fittest. And it
Yeah.
almost always involves structure and dedication and sacrifice. And without those
Discipline.
three things, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think, but people are so multifactorial too. And so I think that to play up to what you said before, individualized care is very important, right? Knowing your clients. And I think part of, being in any, health fitness business is also educating your patient or client on their own body, right? And understanding their own, like Vinny just talked about his limitations, right? I didn't see those same limitations. If
You were the exact opposite. Your limitation was that you wouldn't eat.
yeah, well, because I in the back of my head, like, I had the running of like how much protein I had, how many calories I had, because I've done this for a long time. And so it's like you have all the data points. And granted, I wasn't probably as refined as measuring it out, but I feel like there's a good medium, right? But that might not be the best method for everybody. I think part of this whole game is trying to figure out how your own body mechanics work, how your own physiology works, what your genetic dispositions are, what your limitations are. It's knowing all of that and knowing it really well. And I think that's any goal of any trainer that cares about you or any physician that cares about you, is really educating you about your own physiology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. And to add to that, we don't live in a vacuum. There's only so many hours in the day that you're awake, and people have lives and shit to do. So, telling clients and being honest with clients about, hey, if you want to do this, you can, but it's going to take X amount of hours and energy and effort to do it, right? It's been done before, but this is really hard. Like, what are you willing to do to put into this is important, because you don't want to tell people no if you do think it's feasible, but you also want to be realistic with goals. If someone's an accountant and they're sitting at a desk all day and they're like, hey, I only have 1 hour to lift because I have 2 kids, and I want to get down to 6% body fat and get up on stage, and I don't really have that much control over the food I eat because at work I can't heat up food. Like, well, you're screwed. There's no chance you're going to be able to do this. So let's not make this your goal.
I think that's a big wake up call too, because for potential clients or clients, just personal training and with nutrition, because it's like they have the aspirations to do it. They're motivated. The fire is burning hot, and they're just like, yeah, like I'm in, like I can do it. And then they start doing, they're like, I can't fucking do it. You know, with the dieting stuff, like maybe you really don't want that six pack because it takes away the quality of life that you really, really want to sustain to make you happy. But I wanted to say something before that she brought up. She said something about like knowing your genetic predispositions and knowing your own physiology. It's the same thing like with you with personal training. It's like if someone has a long femur, they're not going to have the perfect squat position. They're going to be leaning forward a little bit more, but that's because of their physiology. So you might see these people actually sitting there really trying to get the perfect form, and their own physiology is working against them. Just like my mindset works against me with intuitive eating. Like I know my limitations. It's the same thing with that.
Yeah, good point. But most personal trainers don't know that, so they think they can get everyone into the perfect squat, and they waste their time. So
yeah, it took me years to realize that I can't go all the way down. It'll hurt my knees.
She could.
That's a whole nother conversation of what's wrong with the fitness industry. People spending 45 minutes with the client trying to get him into proper squat, and it's like this guy's 60 pounds overweight. It's like,
right.
does he need the proper squat? Or does he need to lose 50 of these 60 pounds?
I so much agree on that. I love that. Yeah, that's great.
We're ending on that note, man.
Yeah.
So Steve, man, thank you so much for your time, dude. But please let our listeners know where they can find you, your podcast, everything. If they want to reach out to you, ask you questions, maybe even have some clients want to train with you because you do know what you're doing.
I'm the most active on my personal Instagram, which is just at Steve Washuta, WASHUTA. I have a website that's stevewashuta.com. That's also fitnessbusiness101.com. They take you to the same place. So either of those, you can contact me and you can see my podcast, my personal training, and everything else I do.
Awesome. And it's TrulyFit podcast.
It's the TrulyFit podcast, correct?
Nice. Yes. Awesome. Well, Steve, thanks again, man. Really, really appreciate your time and your knowledge, dude.
Yeah. Thanks for your insight.
Thanks for having me.
So on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.